What happens when a boss smashes an employee's work just to steal the credit? Today's story is a wild ride of corporate sabotage and a secret binder of receipts that took down a giant. Hope you enjoy it. Join the channel for more untold stories. Let's dive in. He didn't even hesitate, just balled up his fist and smashed it straight through the plastic shell like it was a soda can. The impact echoed, sharp and hollow, and shards of my mobility prototype flew across the glass conference room like shrapnel. I stood there frozen, watching almost 9 months of after-hours work explode across the polished floor in front of Morgan Klein, 12 executives, and Dahlia Nur from the Global Mobility Foundation. Morgan turned to the room like he was flipping a switch. "This? Junk," he said, smooth as ever. "But don't worry, Dahlia. We'll get you a proper product next quarter, built by a real team." He didn't even look at me when he said it. Just smiled that boardroom smile and kept talking, like I was some intern who'd wandered in with a school project. Before listening, share which city or country you're watching from, and let's continue. Dahlia barely reacted, just glanced down at the wreckage on the floor, then up at my face. No surprise, no pity, just this sharp, quiet look like she was filing it away. She waited until Morgan launched into another pitch, then leaned toward me and asked softly, "Do you have a personal contact card?" I did. Not an official one. Morgan never ordered any after my promotion. I handed her one of the cheap ones I printed at home. She slid it into her notebook without a word. I caught Morgan's jaw twitch when he saw it. When the room cleared, I dropped to my knees to collect the parts, custom joints, hand-machined hinges, a few unique brackets I couldn't afford to replace. "You can leave that," Morgan said, already halfway to the door. "Maintenance will trash the failed experiment." I stood up. "There was no review. Nobody told me." He cut me off. "The design review committee voted last week. Documentation issues, remember? It's too risky to carry forward." That was the first I'd heard of any vote. "Then why not tell me before today?" I asked. He gave a fake little laugh. "Alden, I fast-tracked the call. We both know this wasn't going to meet market expectations. You're lucky to stay on payroll. Let's not push it." I didn't respond. I just walked back to my desk, my little corner in the open floor plan, thinking about all the times a form came back with the wrong box checked, or a missing date. Back then, I thought maybe I was just sloppy. Dahlia passed by on her way out, trailed by suits and assistants. She caught my eye for half a second, didn't say anything, just held my gaze, steady and unreadable. I knelt down and picked up one last bracket from the floor, didn't even brush the dust off. The next morning, HR called me into a narrow conference room that smelled like stale coffee and printer toner. Morgan was already sitting there with a neat stack of printed reports in front of him, each one tagged with bright neon notes like a teacher marking a failed exam. Missing signatures, misfiled attachments, incorrect formatting. The top sheet had a sticky label that said, "Patterned Carelessness." I took the chair across from them and kept my hands flat on the table, while the HR rep introduced the meeting in a rehearsed voice about documentation concerns. Morgan leaned back like he'd been waiting for this moment all week. He tapped the stack with one finger. "These are compliance reports from the past 18 months, he said. "We're seeing a repeated pattern here, Alden." Then he started flipping through them one by one, shaking his head like he was disappointed in a slow student. Each page had something highlighted, a missing checkbox, a timestamp circled in red, a note about an attachment uploaded late. "You see this?" he said, turning one sheet toward HR. "Submitted after deadline. And here, field incomplete. This kind of thing becomes a liability." The HR rep nodded slowly while writing notes. Morgan continued, pointing to the tiny system timestamps printed at the bottom of each page. According to him, those numbers proved I'd uploaded files late or skipped required sections altogether. While he talked, my mind kept drifting back to one night months earlier. I'd been finishing a safety report when Tessa Pike from the systems group showed up at my desk holding a printed copy. "Morgan wants one small change," she said, sliding it across the desk. He said the wording in this section might confuse compliance. I remember staring at the page because I could have sworn that report was already approved and filed. The signatures were on it. The system status said complete. Still, I made the edit. Just a couple sentences cleaned up. Then I resubmitted the file and forgot about it. A week later, the system flagged the report as corrected after compliance error. Morgan used that exact phrase in my mid-year review while explaining that I struggled with structure. Sitting there in HR, watching him perform his little presentation, I realized that wasn't an isolated moment. It was a pattern. For almost 2 years, things had been quietly shifting under my feet. A testing summary would disappear from the system until I ran the experiment again on my own time. A completed form would bounce back because someone had moved the approval stamp to a different field. Somehow, every mistake ended up attached to my name. Morgan paused on another page and sighed loudly. "Alden is talented," he told HR, like he was delivering bad news about a gifted kid. "But talent doesn't help if the documentation falls apart." I kept my face neutral while he spoke, but my jaw tightened. I didn't grow up around polished corporate systems. My family spent years moving from one farm job to another. My mother worked nights as a nurse's aide in small rural clinics where the power went out without warning. I'd seen medical devices fail just because a battery died or a software screen froze. That's why I built things the way I did. Simple, mechanical, tough enough to keep working when the lights went out. My cousin Mateo reminded me of that every time he sent another shaky video from home. After the accident that wrecked his spine, he tried navigating dirt roads in an old wheelchair with bent wheels. Watching those clips always put a knot in my chest. Those ruts in the road were exactly who I was designing for. At the company, though, that kind of thinking didn't earn respect. In department meetings, Morgan liked to joke about my paperwork allergy. People around the table would half smile, half look away, pretending the comment was harmless. Nobody asked why the supposedly careless engineer had won 3 internal design contests before Morgan arrived. When the meeting finally ended, HR thanked Morgan for his thorough documentation. Then she reminded me to improve my reporting discipline moving forward. I walked out without arguing. That night, I logged into the system from my apartment and downloaded every report I could still access. I printed them all and spread the pages across my kitchen table until the room looked like a cheap archive room. Then I started building a binder. Dates, signatures, system notes, every piece of evidence I could find. I didn't know exactly why I was doing it. I just knew something about Morgan's story didn't line up. By Friday afternoon, the official email arrived in my inbox. I read it once, then again. My new assignment was a minor handrail redesign project under Morgan's supportive supervision. I closed the message, grabbed my half-finished binder, and slid the latest printed report into the plastic sleeve with the others. I was microwaving day-old beans and rice in my apartment when my phone lit up with an out-of-state number. I almost let it go to voicemail. "Alden Rivas?" the voice said when I picked up. "This is Dahlia Noor. I was the one watching your boss turn your prototype into modern art the other day." Her tone was calm, like she hadn't watched a grown man destroy nearly a year of work in front of her. "I can't stop thinking about that frame," she said. It was plain, stubborn, but there was something real under it. Our foundation's been waiting for a design like that for years. I didn't even hesitate. "I can't share company work. Doesn't matter if it's busted or abandoned. Contracts are contracts. Morgan's just waiting for a reason to fire me." Dahlia didn't argue. "Understood," she said. "But do you have anything that predates your time there? Old grad projects, unassigned ideas, work that's still yours?" I stared at the microwave as the numbers counted down. I had plenty. Sketches stuffed in boxes, diagrams I'd scribbled out back when I was running on caffeine and spite. "Yeah," I said. "I do." "Good," she said. "Then meet me tomorrow night. I want to show you something. It's a workshop we use in a shipping warehouse near the docks. Smells more like reality than a showroom." The next evening, I parked next to a loading ramp and walked through a metal side door held open with a chunk of concrete. The place hit me like a memory I hadn't lived yet. Concrete floors, scarred benches, trays of mismatched bolts, the constant faint buzz of cheap fluorescence overhead. There were busted chairs and walkers leaned against the walls in all stages of repair. A half-disassembled scooter was propped up on a sawhorse with wires hanging loose from its side. Dahlia waved me in, then motioned to a man tightening bolts on a rough-looking frame across the room. "This is Raffi Okoro. He just got back from 6 weeks working in hill towns where the power grid exists mostly on paper." Raffi stood up and offered his hand. His grip was firm, calloused, and quick. I nodded. "You're the guy who fixes things after they've already failed." He smiled. "I'm the guy who tries to make sure they don't fail again." I laid my old sketchbooks across one of the workbenches, spirals, torn edges, pages smudged with coffee stains and pencil lead. Concepts I'd obsessed over when I was broke and full of stubborn ideas. As I flipped through the pages, Raffi leaned in, tapping here and there with his finger like he was checking for cracks. "This joint'll fill with sand in the first week," he said. "And this footplate? Kids'll climb it. If the frame folds under their weight, someone's getting hurt." He wasn't being harsh. He was being real. And instead of getting defensive, I found myself nodding, scribbling notes, sketching fixes right there on the page. Dahlia watched for a while, then leaned forward. "There's an international mobility conference in 7 weeks. Every major manufacturer is sending reps. Health ministries, NGOs, clinics from 5 continents. You think you could have something ready by then? As an independent designer." I hesitated. 7 weeks wasn't long. Not for something field-ready. But I also knew Morgan had moved me out of the way. I wasn't going to get another chance like this inside the company. "Yeah," I said. "I think I could." "Good," she said, already standing. "Because I've already requested a floor spot. You'll be showing alongside the best, and they'll all be watching." Raffi clapped me on the shoulder. "Better get to work, man. This place doesn't run on theory." I reached for my notebook and pulled it toward me. "Then let's stop theorizing." By the second week, I was running on gas station coffee and spite. Days under the office fluorescence tweaking the wrist angle on a mass market handrail. Nights in that freezing warehouse grinding out the first real version of my off-road frame. Raffi worked beside me like a machine, wrench in one hand, torch in the other. He told stories between welds, about chairs abandoned halfway up hillside trails, walkers rusted solid in swampy towns, and kids stripping electronics off donated devices because the battery life was garbage and bike parts were more useful. He wasn't bitter about it, just honest. "Designers forget real terrain," he said. "They don't think about what happens when the battery dies 6 miles from home." One night I held up a half-assembled rig during a video call with Matteo. He squinted at the screen, laughed, and said, "That looks like the gate off Tio Emilio's farm. When do I get to try the ugly tank?" Back at the company, Morgan strutted through meetings like a man who'd already won. He cracked jokes about my creative relationship with deadlines, grinned like we were friends, then reminded the room, loud enough for everyone to hear, that investors expect sleek, smart tech, not lawnmower parts. People laughed, or pretended to. I didn't respond, just nodded like I was in on the joke. Tessa didn't laugh. Each week, she looked more worn out, dark circles under her eyes, hunched shoulders, hands always busy with some report or correction. Then one evening, she caught me near the break room and said, "Can we talk?" She pulled me into a dark conference room and shut the door. No small talk. "I've been reopening your reports," she said. "The ones marked final. Morgan told me to update language, add comments about ongoing formatting issues, frequent corrections, things like that." I didn't say anything, just stared at her. "I didn't realize at first," she said, voice tight. "But I think he's building a case, something bigger. He's laying a trail, and I helped lay it. I was just trying to hang on to this job. My dad had a stroke last spring, and I'm still paying off my degree. But it's not cleanup. It's targeting. I didn't yell, didn't lecture. I just walked out, drove home, and grabbed my binder. The one with every original I'd printed. The next morning I brought it in and laid it open on the same table she'd used to update those reports. She flipped through 3 pages and went pale. "They match his talking points almost word for word," she said. "But your originals don't say any of that. The system versions are different." Her hands were shaking when she sat down. That night, back in the warehouse, Dahlia pulled together a quiet field test at a local park. Just a handful of people. 2 teenagers, 1 girl from a mountain village, 1 boy from a flood zone. Each took turns with the newest prototype. The sloped path was wet, muddy, uneven. The chair squeaked. A latch slipped. But they made it through. The girl spun around and challenged the boy to go faster. He grinned and tried. They argued over who got another turn. Rafi and I patched the flaws right there at a workbench using whatever we had on hand. He muttered, "We'll weld it better tomorrow. Let him break it first." I didn't laugh. I just nodded and kept working. Later that night, lying in bed with my arms aching and my brain on fire, I realized something I hadn't let myself think before. If the company decided my old grad work belonged to them, they could shut me down. If Dahlia's foundation thought I was sneaking out company secrets, I'd be finished in that world too. I was balancing on a razor edge, and one slip meant both sides would cut me loose. So I got up. I pulled the binder out of my bag again, and I started organizing it like it might end up in front of a judge. Rain pounded the windshield like it wanted in. Rafi and I loaded the van with all 4 prototypes, 2 off-road chairs, the modular walker, and the stripped-down exoskeleton rig held together with bike parts and field tape. My kitchen window was fogged with steam as I sent Morgan an email. "Food poisoning," I wrote. "Can't move, but happy to join urgent calls." My thumb hovered over the send button longer than I'd admit now. Then I hit it. We rolled into the convention center past sunrise, soaked and running on fast food and 3 hours of sleep. Dahlia met us at the side loading dock and walked us through the maze of glossy booths. Some companies had brought digital displays taller than me. Giant screens looping promo reels of futuristic chairs gliding through sanitized showrooms. Dahlia waved it all off and led us to a smaller central stage, boxed in by partition walls. She wanted the prototypes hidden until our slot. Through a narrow break in the panels, I watched the crowd come in. Health officials in suits, therapists in polos with embroidered clinic logos, engineers with tool bags and backpacks. Then I saw Morgan. He was surrounded by 3 junior staffers from our department, standing beside a sleek booth lined with powered exoskeletons and touchscreen kiosks. His tie was perfect. His smile was the exact one he used in investor meetings. He didn't see me. Not yet. The lights dimmed. Dahlia stepped up to the mic like she'd done this 100 times and said, "Let's talk about design that still works when the lights go out." Polite chuckles rippled through the crowd. Then she hit the line that landed like a stone. "Our first demonstration comes from a designer who's been told more than once that his work is too mechanical to matter." She said my name. The partitions rolled back. My devices sat under bright lights, raw metal frames, exposed linkages, not a screen or motor in sight. They looked like farm tools next to the sci-fi gear around us. But right then, 2 teenagers rolled out from the side ramp. The girl from the park led the way through a fake rocky path a volunteer team had set up the night before. The boy followed, cutting across a shallow sand pit. I stepped to the mic and explained everything in plain terms. How the frames flexed on uneven ground, how a wrench and some rope could fix 90% of failures, how no power didn't mean no mobility. From the stage, I spotted Morgan near the back. His jaw tightened. I saw phones come out around him. A few people drifted from his booth to ours. The crowd got louder with questions. How much? What's the build time? Could they get schematics? I answered one after another. Rafi passed around diagrams. Then someone tapped my arm. An older man in a gray blazer, looked like he'd stepped straight out of a boardroom. "I'm Harlan Voss," he said. "I founded your company 27 years ago." I barely had time to react before he added, "I just watched my so-called early failures work better than advertised." We stepped into a side lounge near the edge of the hall, out of the noise. Harlan took his time sitting down. He looked at me, calm but sharp. "I'm told Morgan gave a talk last quarter at a summit. Claimed these mechanical concepts were his old experiments. Said the company dropped them because they didn't scale. Said they were obsolete." I didn't say anything, just waited. Harlan leaned forward. "So explain to me why his so-called failures match your grad school work exactly. Right down to the folding joint on that rear axle." I opened my backpack and pulled out the notebook I'd been carrying everywhere since the binder filled up. I didn't hand it over, just opened it on the table between us and turned to a sketch dated 7 years ago. Harlan studied the page, his brow furrowed. "I've seen this layout. I've seen it in pitch decks he gave to the board." I met his eyes. "And none of those decks had my name on them, did they?" He didn't answer right away, just nodded once and sat back in his chair. Harlan didn't rush. He flipped through every page like he was rereading something he'd helped draw. My sketches, notes, dates scrawled in the margins from years before I ever set foot in that building. "This isn't similar," he finally said. "It's exact." He leaned back, fingers steepled, and looked off like he was dragging something up from memory. "In the early days," he said, "I drove around in a truck with one busted taillight and 2 crates of braces strapped in the back. We'd set up pop-ups in clinic parking lots, fix what we could, and learn by doing." I stayed quiet. He kept going. "There was a guy, early on, slick, numbers guy. He tried to edge me out. Took my reports, rewrote them, pitched the board on the scalable parts like I was just some sentimental founder clinging to garage logic. Almost lost the company. Almost lost my marriage, too, back then." He didn't sound angry, just tired. "I swore I'd never let the marketing side bury the people doing the real work again," he said. "But I stepped too far back, let Morgan get too comfortable." He stood, reached into his coat pocket, and handed me a card. It was heavier stock than I expected. Just his name, a direct number, and an old logo. "I want you to send me scanned copies of your thesis, the original one, and anything from when you applied. Cover letter, submission forms. I need a clean timeline by Monday." Then he nodded once and left. That night, back in my apartment, I dropped my bag by the door and stood staring at my phone as it buzzed for the 6th time with Morgan's name on the screen. By the 7th, I picked up. He didn't waste time. "You've paraded company concepts in front of international funders," he snapped. "If this only ends with your termination, consider yourself lucky." I stayed calm. "You mean the concepts I published in my thesis years before I was hired? The ones built in a warehouse with 0 company resources?" He paused, just long enough. "Don't split hairs," he said. "Your employment contract covers all related developments. You're skating dangerously close to breach." I could hear the shift in his voice before he even said it. Suddenly, he was reasonable. "Maybe there's a way to work this out," he said. "Maybe we fold your mechanical stuff into the broader platform, pitch it as an integrated approach. If you can just make sure Harlan knows everything's under control." I could still see him in my mind, smashing my prototype like it was trash, smirking through every one of his little jokes and meetings. "No," I said. "I'm not covering for you." Then I hung up. Next morning, just past 7, someone knocked at my front door. I looked through the peephole and saw Tessa standing there in an oversized hoodie, holding a coffee and a folder, like she'd barely slept. When I opened the door, she didn't say anything at first, just handed me a thumb drive and a stack of printed emails. "I'm done," she said. "He called me last night. Told me to pull anything that made you look sloppy. He was getting ready to solidify the narrative of chronic documentation problems." His exact words. She looked completely worn down, eyes puffy, voice dry. I backed everything up, all the versions. The edits he made me insert, the timestamps, it's all there. I took the folder and opened it on the kitchen counter. Every instruction he'd given her, exact phrases, emails forwarded with highlights, file paths in the company system. Tessa leaned against the wall like her legs might give out. "I can't be part of this anymore," she said, "even if it means I get fired." I zipped the folder shut, dropped the drive in my bag, and grabbed my keys. "Then let's go make sure you don't." The red light on the recorder blinked like a warning. I sat down across from Morgan, slid my thesis and binder onto the table, and waited. Harlan didn't waste time. "We're recording for transparency," he said. "Any board member or legal rep not in the room will be given full access. Mr. Klein, present your concerns." Morgan gave a practiced nod, opened his manila folder, and pulled out a stack of printed reports. "This is a record of ongoing noncompliance from Alden Rivas," he began, "documented over more than 20 months. He laid each sheet out carefully, like evidence at a trial. Missed fields, upload delays, internal memos about resubmitted forms and correction logs. He tapped one document with a pen. System timestamps confirm repeated late submissions, several flagged as noncompliance by the reporting software itself. Maris, sitting to my right, scribbled something in her notebook but didn't interrupt. Morgan kept his tone measured. Given that, and the recent unauthorized external demonstration of what appear to be company-derived concepts, I believe this represents a serious breach. He looked at Harlan. My recommendation is immediate separation, pending final legal review. Harlan leaned back but didn't speak. His expression didn't move. Maris turned to me. "Mr. Rivas, do you have materials you'd like the group to review?" I flipped open my binder, slid the thesis across the table, then opened to the first of several printed reports, versions I'd archived long before they were altered. "These are originals," I said, "printed before the internal edits Morgan ordered. Compare the phrasing." Maris nodded. She pulled up one of the same reports on the screen. My version had a clean summary. The company's system version included a full paragraph about chronic documentation irregularities, a phrase I'd never written. "Please direct your attention to the metadata," she said, highlighting the system revision log. "Note that the language was inserted under Mr. Klein's login after the report was marked final." Morgan didn't respond. Maris clicked into another file. This one was reopened 3 weeks after initial approval. Edited again under Mr. Klein's credentials. Same language, same phrasing. The email chain provided by Ms. Pike confirms he instructed these edits directly. Dahlia leaned forward slightly. "So the documentation issues were constructed?" Maris kept her voice even. "The pattern strongly suggests that, yes." Then she opened a video clip on her tablet and slid it across to Harlan. It was from the summit Morgan spoke at, him on stage saying, "My early mechanical concepts turned out to be impractical at scale." Behind him, on the screen, were prototypes that looked like mine, almost part for part. Harlan paused the video. "Why does your presentation omit Mr. Rivas's name entirely?" Morgan tried to recover. "I was speaking on behalf of the broader development team. Attribution sometimes gets lost in condensed formats." Maris cut in. "Or stripped, according to the version history of this concept memo," she said, pulling up another document on the screen. "It shows Mr. Rivas's name removed and Mr. Klein's inserted 5 days before the summit." Harlan's tone dropped. "You know I built this company in a shed behind a clinic in Oklahoma. The last guy who pulled this kind of stunt almost cost me everything." Morgan's voice faltered. "I believed the integration was implied. It wasn't meant to deceive." Maris tapped her pen on the table. "Mr. Voss, I've confirmed at least 6 altered internal documents and 1 full presentation deck with false attribution." Harlan stood. "We're taking a short recess. I need to call 2 board members." He nodded to Maris. She grabbed her phone and stepped out with him. Morgan didn't look at me. He just stared at the edge of the table like it might open up and swallow him whole. I didn't say a word, just leaned back and waited. Harlan stepped back in first, followed by Maris, still on her phone. She ended the call, nodded once to someone on the other end, and then took her seat. "All right," Harlan said. "We've spoken with the board." Morgan straightened, like he was about to launch into another speech, but Harlan lifted a hand. "We've heard your concerns," Harlan said, "and we've seen the record. What matters now is whose work this actually is, and who has been altering the trail." Maris turned the screen toward Morgan. "We've confirmed at least 6 altered internal documents, 1 presentation deck with stripped attribution, and a pattern of edits made under your login after reports were finalized," she said. "The board considers that falsification, not cleanup." I opened my binder and turned it toward them, to the sketch dated more than 7 years earlier, the joint system Morgan had been calling Company Innovation. "This is from my grad work," I said. "Form, function, even the measurements match the internal designs he's been pitching." Harlan studied the page, then looked back at Morgan. "The last time someone tried to play games with credit and compliance," he said, "it almost burned this company down. I'm not watching it happen twice." Maris closed her notebook. "Based on the documents, the version history, and Ms. Pike's backups, the board has voted to terminate you for cause, Mr. Klein," she said. "Effective immediately." Morgan froze. Harlan nodded to security. 2 guards stepped in without a word. "We'll recover your laptop and revoke your access," Maris added. "Please hand over your badge." Morgan stood slowly. He looked at me, not with rage or panic, just a hollow disbelief, like the ground had moved and nobody warned him. He didn't say anything. For once, the man had no speech left. The guards flanked him as he walked out. I sat back in my chair and waited for the sound of the door clicking shut. When the door clicked shut behind Morgan, nobody spoke for a moment. The silence didn't feel like fear anymore. It felt like breathing room. Harlan turned toward me and didn't waste words. "I should have checked. I should have asked why the mechanical line went dark. That's on me." It wasn't some bland corporate apology. It was direct, from one engineer to another. Maris flipped open her notebook. "We'll start by restoring attribution," she said. "All internal documents corrected. Any external partners who received altered materials will be notified. Going forward, no one modifies compliance reports without secondary sign-off and an audit log." Dahlia leaned in, voice steadier than it had been all morning. "Since the conference, I've already heard from 6 countries. Health officials who want to pilot your frames where powered chairs have failed, places where the batteries die before lunch and there's no one to fix them." That hit me harder than anything else in the room. Harlan tapped the table once, decisive. "We're setting up a new division, Adaptive Mechanical Mobility. Joint initiative between the company and Dahlia's foundation. You'll run it." I didn't answer right away. Then I said, "I'll do it if I have control over who I hire. I want an oversight group, small, direct, including you and Maris, and written protections for any team member who reports internal sabotage or manipulation." Maris looked at me like she'd already started drafting it in her head. Harlan nodded. "Deal." For the first time in years, it felt like the rules might actually be written for someone like me, for once. Later that afternoon, I found Tessa sitting alone in one of the smaller labs. The lights were on, but she wasn't working, just staring at a blank monitor, hands clenched in her lap. I knocked on the glass and stepped in. "Hey," I said. "I meant what I said before. You coming forward, that mattered." She didn't look up right away. "You're offering me a promotion?" Her voice cracked halfway through. "After I helped him bury your name?" "You made a mistake," I said, "but you're not the reason it stuck. The best way to make up for it is to make sure no one else goes through what I did. Come lead systems. We'll build checks that can't be gamed." She nodded slowly, tears running without drama, just quiet exhaustion. "Okay. Yeah, I want to help fix it. Rafi joined within the week. His only condition, field testing, came before boardroom polishing. If it can't survive a muddy alley and a 12-year-old who treats it like a jungle gym, he said, we're not done. We weren't building for catalogs. We were building for survival. A few months later, I drove a shipment of early production units down to my hometown. My mother opened the door like she'd been waiting years to see it happen. Mateo was already outside, bouncing in his seat. We set up the ramp behind the house, dirt packed uneven, ruts from old storms still cutting through the lane. He rolled out fast, faster than I expected, laughing the whole way. "Tell Morgan I said thanks," he shouted over his shoulder. "This tank eats gravel for breakfast." My mom yelled at both of us to slow down. Neither of us did. I'm 52 now, more gray in my beard than I like to admit, sitting across from someone younger at a diner in Fresno, stirring coffee that's already gone cold. I tell them this story the way I'd tell it to a friend, straight, no drama, just the way it happened. We started with one warehouse. Now we've got over a dozen scattered across 3 continents. We train welders who used to patch farm equipment and teach local techs how to fix our chairs with whatever tools they've got. Some of those shops run without steady power. Doesn't stop a thing. Those 2 teenagers from the first demo? The girl runs a peer support group now. The boy's a rehab tech who emails us field fixes we never would have thought of. Mateo sends me videos of neighborhood kids racing up hills that used to leave him stuck in the mud. I tell people what I didn't understand at the time, how deep Morgan had buried the sabotage. Dahlia showed me clips I'd never seen. Maris walked me through version histories and flagged records I missed. Tessa's confession filled in the rest. When Morgan resurfaced at another firm, I kept my distance. Then a news story broke about creative reporting in one of their compliance audits. I didn't even flinch. The system caught him, and for once, I didn't have to lift a finger. Harlan calls sometimes, usually from his porch with birds yelling in the background. He asks what we're building next and reminds me not to let the mission drown under buzzwords. He says the work's still worth protecting, even when it gets messy. Especially then. I've walked into clinics in towns where power's out more than it's on and found our chairs still rolling, patched with copper wire, duct tape, even wood. Doesn't matter. They move. That's the point. Parents don't ask whose name was on the concept deck. They ask if their kid can get to school, to the store, to the clinic without waiting on a charger that may or may not work that day. That's what matters. I tell the new hires straight up that there were nights I wanted to burn it all down, walk away, let someone else fix it. But I'm glad I didn't. We made enough noise, left enough proof that the system had to shift. And when people ask if watching Morgan get walked out felt like revenge, I tell them no. Revenge is knowing he has to live in the world we built without him. Do you think Morgan deserved a second chance, or did he get exactly what he earned? When someone tried to bury your work, did you chase revenge or build better? If you've got hype, tap it, hit like, subscribe, and drop your answer in the comments.